Ian is Professor of Environmental Science and Economics at the University of Exeter, where he co-directs the Land, Environment, Economics and Policy Institute, otherwise known as LEAP, which is a multidisciplinary team bringing together the variety of disciplines and perspectives necessary to improve policy, business and social decision-making regarding the economy and environment. Ian is a member of the Natural Capital Committee, reporting to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and has advised the Secretary of State for the Environment since 2013. And as everybody will know, that is currently George Eustice. Ian was part of the group that proposed the 25-year environment plan and advised us on its design, as well as the Environment and Agriculture Bills. He is a member of the Board of Directors of UK Joint Nature Conservation Committee. Ian also leads the Southwest Partnership for Environmental and Economic Prosperity, known as SWEEP, which is a collaborative initiative to help deliver economic and community benefits to the Southwest, while also protecting and enhancing the area's natural resources. The SWEEP Expo is being held from the 20th to the 22nd of October, and all are invited. And if you want more details, email SWEEP, that's all in uppercase, at exeter.ac.uk for details. And I'm now going to hand over to Ian. Thank you so much for coming. You're a very busy man, and thank you for sparing the time.
No. Actually, the honour really is all mine. I think this is a fabulous event, and I'm very much obliged for you inviting me. Thank you very much. Just want to check you can all hear me okay, and you can see this beautiful woodland that I've got in front of me. I thought I'd illustrate this talk, the right tree in the right place, with an example of the wrong trees in the wrong place, just to show that you can do that. I'm going to talk about this natural capital idea and in the context of net zero, but I don't want you to get too hung up on the terminology here. I'm going to go through it because it's very powerful at the moment, but really what you've got, you can go back, you can see all those different terms like sustainable development, ecosystem services, and that's all that sort of stuff. What these terms are all trying to get at is that there is a very intimate relationship between the natural environment, the economy, and society. And whatever the term is, and I'm quite sure it will change in the future, that relationship will still be there. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, rather than getting too hung up on particular terms. Now, let's see if I have the same problem. Can everybody see the next slide? Thank you very much, Connor. Cheers. Just to underpin the idea that this is a very important concept at the moment, it's one that underpins the 25-year environment plan, which in turn is the motivation for the Environment Bill, and also has quite an effect on the Agriculture Bill. But there's actually a more important document that you won't see very often, and it's called the Green Book for very obvious reasons, and it's the Treasury Guidelines for Public Spending Appraisal. And you might be surprised to know that these guidelines now have very much accepted this relationship between the natural environment and the economy. It's right there at the centre, and there's two big elements to this. First of all, there's an acceptance of what's called natural capital stock levels. So just simply the stocks of natural resources that are out there, and the concern that they are getting degraded. And the second issue is the need to consider all of the effects of the spending that we undertake, including actually in the business sector. So those two rules, think about what's happening overall to the environment, and number two, think about the wider effects of any change are now embedded in Treasury guidelines. So what is this natural capital approach? Even though I don't want you to get too hung up on the wording, just go through it quickly. So it's the idea that nature has a set of resources which underpin all well-being on the planet. So resources like air, water, soil, geology, oil, and of course living things, often referred to as biodiversity, often confusingly, but living things. And there are stocks of these. So a really good example of this would be the stock of fish in the ocean. All right. Now, these stocks lead to flows very similar to money in the bank giving you interest every year. And using the fish analogy, so a population of fish will breed and generate a number of fish that we could take perfectly sustainably every year. But again, like money in the bank, if we start spending more than the interest we get from that stock, we're going to find that stock falling. And long term, that won't be sustainable. It won't be sustainable for the environment, but that also means it won't be sustainable for our well-being. There isn't any choice about that. However, you know, being brutal, the environment never put dinner on my plate. It comes, all the things that we rely on for well-being are actually a mix of different capitals. So there's nature's input, nature's resources, but there's also other things going in here. There's like human capital, manufactured capital. All of these things have to be recognized as well. We can't just think about nature separate from the environment. In fact, that's what we've been doing for about the last sort of 50, 60 years, and it hasn't worked. We've got to see this as a linked system. If nothing else, is because by doing this actually does engage the large majority of people, okay? Not just those that want to preserve nature for its own wonder. Okay, now you can see that list of good things that we want there, and actually we want all of them. We want all of these things. The problem is, because of those stocks, there's a limit to what we can have on this. We cannot have infinite amounts of all of these things. It's impossible. So we have to begin thinking about working out which of these are most important. We obviously want a bit of everything, but we need to think about the amounts of these different things and the values that they give to us as people. There's a practical problem here. They come in a myriad of different units, and it is pretty much impossible to deal with these units as they stand. Just imagine that you are queen or king of the world, and you're a nice queen or king. You want people to be happy. Now you've got to deal with the fact that there isn't infinite resources, and you've got to make trade-offs across these. There isn't a choice. You can't just say, I want all our resources to go into physical health. Well, there won't be any food, there won't be any water. You've got to think about all these things together. You have to make trade-offs. Every time we make decisions, we make trade-offs. Very difficult to do that. I would say that if you were monarch of the world, you'd want to know how useful each one of these are to the well-being that you want to generate. You want to think about their value. There is no perfect unit for this. The one that I would argue is least worst is money. Why? Because it is a unit of value. It's a very imperfect one, but as soon as you go for any other unit, you'll find out that they're even worse. There's been an awful lot of research over the last 50 years on trying to make these measurements, these valuations better. We've done a reasonably good job. It's certainly better than not doing it with most of these things, but not everything. And what I want to highlight is the value of wild species and conserving them. Now, for a variety of reasons, which I'd love to go into, and maybe in questions we can't come up with robust values for these. Some people would say it's because there's morality and ethics associated with that. Other people might say it's just beyond our abilities to measure these. Now, when you've got a situation like that, that means you have to take especial care of those things that aren't being valued. They have to be included in the decision making, and I'll show you an example of how we're going to do that. So the answer is not, well, we'll just ignore that, because that unfortunately is the answer that we've had to the past. Just the opposite. For example, one very good way is to say, right, well, we're not going to allow any losses of this. All right. So we take this information, stick it into our appraisal, like the Green Book, and make decisions, implement them, and the whole thing goes round again. There's a couple of things that we need to think about before we've got the final system. The first is that we've spent the last 200 years converting nature's capital into all the other capitals that we've got, building machinery, building homes, good things here, making health services, making education, that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, we've gone too far, and we have begun to extract that nature's capital at a rate and a level which is actually damaging it. Probably the most famous example, of course, is climate change. We use the climate for many, many things, including soaking up our waste carbon gases, and we've basically overused it, and that's why it's degrading. So we need to add that sustainability constraint into our appraisal as well. And that means that the whole system here can be simplified into just 2 rules. And the first is sustainability. You have to ensure that the stocks of these well-being created resources don't decline across generations. Otherwise, it's not fair on the future. And we actually have to be particularly care about natural capital, because we have very clearly overused it. But the second is we also have to think about the costs and benefits of doing different things. We have to think about all these, because we can't assume there's infinite resources. We have to allocate those resources in ways that are going to improve well-being as much as possible. And one of the important things that we have to do as part of that, yes, we've got to think about all the costs, all the benefits. We've got to think about different things to do with those resources. Okay, I want to illustrate this with an example: land use in the UK. So this is driven by many forces, and it generates many values. Some of those are passed through markets and are priced, and those are all things that we're very familiar with. However, there's a huge amount of other very valuable flows that come out of land which are not priced in markets. That does not mean they're not valuable. They're actually some of the most valuable aspects of land use. And as I showed in the diagram before, what we're attempting to do is, where we can, let's value those robustly. Where we can't, let's make sure there's no loss. Okay, and you can see the sort of examples there. We are very, very fortunate in this country that we have amazing data. Just the most phenomenal data resources, I would say, in the world, actually. Certainly better than, say, the United States. We have these from a variety of sources. We actually go out, measure things. Also, satellites are obviously increasingly important. And we're getting measurements now that are absolutely tremendous. So here's some work on the left-hand side done by Sweep, which is helping the Forest for Cornwall initiative, fabulous initiative, trying to generate images where you can actually use a computer to count all the trees that we've got, and even begin to say what sort of species they are. Okay, so we can use all this data to understand why, well, to answer one very important question: why is land use the way it is? And therefore, how can it be changed? And you can see that land use is the result of the interaction of three big forces: the physical environment, markets, prices, those sort of things, and policy. And if you bring data on all of those three together, you can actually generate very accurate understanding of why land is the way it is, and therefore how we can change it to improve the well-being of everybody. Okay, amazing data, long time series. I know that you would like me to go through the model in detail, and as you can see, it's a fabulous model. I mean, it's flexible, it's got all the interactions, wonderful model. Sadly, I haven't got time to do that, so instead, I'm just going to say, does it work? And here's our predictions of land use, and this is what actually happened. And you can see it works really well. Okay, so it's an accurate way, and that means that because we've got a model that works well, we can then ask questions such as, what's going to happen if things change? And one thing that we know is going to change, it's too late to stop it happening, certainly for most of my remaining lifetime, is that the climate's going to change. All right, we can change policy as well, but the climate is going to change. It's going to get warmer, and during the growing season, it's going to get drier. It's actually going to get pretty wet other times of the year. Okay, how is this going to affect land use? Here we've got two land uses. There's many others, of course, but just two that I've selected. This is roughly the situation at the moment. Lots of cereals being grown over to the east, lots of livestock over towards the west. What happens as climates change? Well, there's more and more cereals going to be grown, and livestock is going to be pushed into more and more marginal areas. Actually, the number of livestock isn't going to decrease that much. Its concentration is going to go up quite a bit, and that's actually not good news for the environment. Neither is the concentration of cereals, because both of those are going to have quite big environmental impacts. Water quality is going to decline. You know, this is all assuming we don't do anything about it. We can do things about it, but if we don't, this is what's going to happen. That's going to have pretty bad impact on ecosystems and the species that live in them. And it's going to affect people. It's going to affect them through lots of routes. Here's just two I've chosen. It's going to affect the costs of water treatment with all those extra nutrients in. And it's going to affect the quality of the environments we can recreate in. You can see, of course, how we could value the water treatment costs. What about these non-market values? Can we actually get robust, non-silly values for these? Well, we can. We can get them from just looking at people's behaviour. So here's an example. We have fantastic data in this country on where people live and where they visit and how many times. Okay, so we can bring this data together and we can begin to then explain the patterns we see. And one of the big things that explains those patterns is the quality of environments available to them. And we find that, amazingly, people prefer to go to high quality places more than low quality places. It's amazing that I get paid for this stuff, but I do. So we can bring this all together, analyze it, and make it all look very complicated. But basically, all we're doing is quantifying that very simple, obvious relationships. People prefer high quality to low quality. What's more, they value them. They value them both in terms of the time they devote to these things, and time is valuable, and in terms of the costs they spend to get to these different places. So you can work out these values, no crazy assumptions, you just look at people's behavior. Other things that you can measure pretty well, you can look at how, for example, climate change is going to affect tree growth. Now, we've got a whole lot of different trees in this country. A lot of the commercial species, things like Sitka spruce, they're not going to like what's happening in this country. They want to be in the wet, cool areas of Oregon and places, well, they're not wet and cool at the moment, but they used to be. And so they're not going to like it getting warmer. Other species are actually going to quite enjoy these changes. Another effect that's very important, when you change land use, and I'm not just talking about trees, trees are very important, but I mean, Cheryl made some great points about this. All land uses have greenhouse gas implications, some of them positive, some of them negative. And when you change land use, you change greenhouse gases. Generally, agriculture is an emitter of greenhouse gases. Generally, forestry sequesters carbon. That's not always true. You can actually have global warming forests, plant a load of trees on a big peat wetland that's actually going to emit more carbon and methane than it stores. Okay, all of those things before, I feel fairly confident about measuring and valuing. I feel confident about measuring biodiversity. I don't feel confident about valuing it. We can see the relationships between changes in drivers of land use, changes in the response of land use, and how this affects biodiversity. And again, we've got great data in here. Some work we did with JNCC and BTO looked at all this, and I'm afraid the findings were not very good with regard to the future. Sorry, they were great findings, they were just bad messages. Things are not looking good with regard to a lot of the native species in these countries, in our country. Okay, we need to bring all this together. We need to make it easier for decision makers to be able to use this information. So for about the last 5 years, we've been working with DEFRA to generate decision support systems. And there are versions of this which are now freely available on our website. You can use them yourself. I admit that the very latest versions are not on the website yet. That's because we're advising DEFRA with regard to their ELM program, and they've made us sign various non-disclosure things, but eventually it is supposed to be that everything will be out there. Everything that we're allowed to put out there, we give away for free. And this system already, you can do things like this. You can go to an area, you can select any area you want across GB. You can select by location or by river catchment, that sort of stuff. You can look at the consequence, you can look at the situation right now. You can look at what the land use is, what the products from that land is, what the tree growth is, what the recreation, what the greenhouse gas balance, the water environment, flora and fauna. You can look at all of those in quantity terms and where they're robust in value terms as well. And you can see out into the future how they are expected to change. You can then also put in, you can alter the land use. You can say, well, what if we planted some trees here or something like that? There will be a system. We've designed a system. It's not available online yet because of what I said, where you could actually instead say, right, rather than me changing the land, you tell me what the best land use in my area would be, for example, for storing carbon or improving the water quality or doing multiple things at the same time. Here's, to finish, an example. Britain's new forests. Everybody is falling over themselves to say how many trees they're going to plant, or at least they were prior to the election. The government asked us to sort of produce some analysis on that, and we said, well, actually, we're going to do you better than that. We're going to do two analyses. One is we're going to say, what would happen if you do what you normally do, which is you just leave it to the market. You take some money and you throw it out there, and anybody can apply for it. Okay. Well, what you're really saying is that people will apply according to the subsidy level, also according to what they're going to lose, say food production values if you're a farmer, and also some other actually quite minor values like timber. especially minor because it's very delayed, and you're going to ignore everything else. What happens when you do that? Well, this is where you'd expect the planting to occur. And actually, that's a disaster, because you're planting there on a lot of peatlands, you're planting in areas which some of them will really mess up local biodiversity. They won't really do much with regard to flooding, that sort of thing. Okay. What about if you take, for want of a better word, a natural capital approach? Think about this, the various flows that you can get from the environment. Let's think about all of these things here. It's all the other stuff that we had before, but also things like greenhouse gases, water quality, recreation, biodiversity, those sort of things. Let's value those things that we can. Let's make sure that we do not, at very least, lose those things that we can't value. You could put in different rules here, and we have. You could say, instead of no loss, we want a net gain. All right. If you do that, do you carry on planting in the same place? No. You plant in very, very different places, and you generate very, very different values. Much, much better. Targeted responses to net zero are absolutely essential. Otherwise, we could actually make things worse. And this is what I'm worried about. This is a complex problem. If we treat it as something simple, we could get it wrong. Now, the next slide is a bit scary. There it is. Those are all the things that you need to think about to get this right. And we're actually attempting to undertake this analysis at the moment. We've undertook most of it, not everything. So, for example, we haven't looked at the thing that Cheryl said about the impact between what you do on the land and what happens in marine areas with seagrasses and that sort of stuff. All right. Too much to talk about, but I just wanted to illustrate this is a complex issue, but we actually are a very long way down the road to answering it. There's a couple of papers, if you're interested, they're available, I think, from Sue, and please do register if you'd like to come along to our expo. It's free, it's focused on the Southwest, and it tries to take this way of thinking into businesses, local government and communities. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. That was amazing, and I'm looking forward to the recording. Really study
sorry,
it.
it was a bit fast.
No, it's fine. It's good to know that there's at least one government advisor that knows what they're talking about.
Thanks.
And I thought we might just take one question.
Sure.
From Tim Bird, and Sue's very kindly typed that and sent it to me. Is that okay with you? Or you?
Yeah, I just want to say straight away, I'm seeing the comments that are coming through. I am humbled. Thank you very much.
No, not at all. You deserve it. So, is that okay with you? Will you take one question? Or,
yeah.
Okay. Should agricultural subsidies be based on soil carbon sequestration and improving water quality? If you get this right, most other things fall into place. That question's from Tim Bird.
That's a great question.
Yes.
I'm going to broadly say yes. I suppose I would like us to try and take as broad a view to the multiple effects that land use change has upon the environment and thereby human well-being in determining the way we subsidise agriculture. We have, I'll be honest with you, I probably shouldn't say this because I don't know, it's a little bit political. I'm actually very pro-European. The one real golden lining of leaving Europe is leaving the common agricultural policy, which is a disaster both for the environment and for a good 3/4 of farmers. It's not a good policy for anybody. It's dreadful value for taxpayers. By moving to a system where public funds are directed towards public benefits, the possibility is there to actually generate a much more sustainable way of using our land, and at the same time actually improving the lot of the majority of farmers, because 75% of the money goes to 25% of the farmers. It's not a fair system at all, and we have to take the owners and tenants of land with us when we're doing this. Otherwise it won't happen. Whether or not what I take that question as saying, you know, would this be a simple shortcut? But perhaps. I mean, and certainly we do have to use approaches which are pragmatic. But as I've tried to illustrate here, the tools to do this are already available. My real concern is, will they get used or not? You know, we're doing this stuff with DEFRA. There are many people in DEFRA that are, in fact, the vast majority of people in DEFRA are totally on board with this. My concern is that, let's call them political considerations, will derail this. If they don't, then I think we can look forward to a much better future for land use for everybody, including the large majority of farmers. I will admit there will be some losers. I'm afraid that James Dyson may actually not get another £3 million next year.